Well, welcome back, everybody. So, Basic Education Minister Angie Motshekga has announced the reopening of 95% of schools for grade 7s and 12 this morning. The minister, along with provincial MECs, addressed a media briefing about the state of readiness. The remaining 5% or so of schools that are not ready yet will remain closed until alternative plans have been made. Joining us to talk about the current schooling situation in South Africa is Education Specialist Professor Mary Metcalfe. Professor, always great speaking to you. Thanks so much for your time again.
Good morning, Leanne. Thank you.
So you recently said that you did not think that schools would be ready to reopen today. They are reopening. What do you think now? What are your views on this?
It's wonderful that so many schools have received their PPEs. But being ready is more than receiving the PPEs. It's also about having the systems in place to use them. It's about having the timetabling in place and the necessary teachers for the available classroom space. And it's also readiness in terms of having the community understanding what needs to be done to support the school and the children and the parents ready to return. So this is a process. It's not an event.
And that's, this is, I suppose, something that we need to constantly keep as a reminder. As an educator, explain to us the importance of youngsters going back to school, though.
I think it's very important that we get back to school for many reasons. One of the reasons is that young people, all of us, are social beings. And the opportunity to be with others in a normal environment is part of being human. The second reason is that I think that many learners depend on the National School Nutrition Program. And in this time of economic hardship, feeding at school is crucial. The third reason is because all of the international research shows that when children are out of school for the summer holidays or for whatever reason, it's the poorest children who lose more time, who lose more of the skills that they already had felt that they'd mastered. So there's a regression in learning gains after a period out of school.
And this is the reality because so many learners have lost a lot of days. I don't want to calculate the amount of days. I'm not 100% sure, but there are children that haven't been to school in approximately 3 months, and this is going to take a lot of effort from teachers to catch them up. And this is where we need to see teachers at their best, and this is a lot of pressure on them. So as much as we talk to the learners and the pressure on learners, what about the actual teacher who has to catch up all of this work?
There's pressure on learners and there's pressures on teachers. And parents, I think, need to understand that we're not going back to school as it was. Schools are going to be very different in multiple ways. There's new routines that have to be put into place. Those are going to take time. There's also the fact that learners aren't going back to 100% of school time. Grade 12s, I hope they do, but for the rest of the grades, they may be going back for about 50% of the time. So the approach of catching up the curriculum is going to be stressful for learners and for teachers. We need to minimize that stress, and we need to focus on school as a caring environment in which school nutrition happens, where learners are able to understand the nature of the epidemic, understand how to support themselves and protect others. And we need to make sure that the time that is spent on school is focused on curriculum enrichment. I believe that we should take passing and failing off the table because it's going to be profoundly inequitable, profoundly stressful for learners and also for teachers, judging what to teach in the time available when they have less time. And in fact, when we are in several parts of the country going to be facing an increase in infections. The scientists are saying that Eastern Cape, Gauteng, KZN, are going to be following a trajectory similar to Western Cape. So there are certain times ahead, and we need to be ready for that uncertainty. We need to respond, and we need to be supportive of each other.
Seen in numerous other countries where they've gone and done what we are doing right now, exactly the same thing, opening schools, but then within the week have changed their minds because they've seen that there have been outbreaks or that the infection rate is now spreading in the schools, and they've had to do an about turn and close. And this is a fear, I imagine, amongst all educators right now, and learners and parents, that there are going to be these outbreaks and that the schools are going to close and we'll be going back to where we were. Is this a fear that you share with those concerned?
Absolutely. All going into flu season. When a child wakes up at home feeling flu-y, I would suggest that parents need to keep the child at home because and test the child if those symptoms develop more inconsistent with COVID. But schools have got this impossible task of saying which children have got sore throat, temperatures, and I think it's going to throw schools into confusion if they don't have the ready scientific understanding to turn the screening into testing. So when schools screen, if a teacher or a learner presents with flu-like symptoms, it would be better for them to go home and to quarantine and to be tested in the local health facility. Because if they're tested as positive, then they need to quarantine and they should not be at school. But I don't want schools to be in a permanent state of tension and crisis because there are people with flu-like symptoms, which are actually only flu.
And that's, that's the worry, because you spoke to the pressures that are going to be on teachers, because as much as they're going to be teachers, in a way they almost need to be health experts as well, because they're now going to watch these students very closely, make sure they adhere to all the social distancing, wear their masks, keep the distance from their friends, and also look out for symptoms that they may carry. So this is a tough time for schooling, for everybody going back into it. But as you mentioned in the beginning, it is vital to get children back into that system.
Yes.
Yeah.
They have to be health experts, education experts, but they also have to be psychosocial supporters of children with their anxieties. As the epidemic grows and continues to rise, there's going to be more children anxious about relatives, anxious about people in their community, and teachers themselves are carrying the greatest burden of this. And at this time, more than ever, I think that we need to support our teachers, respect their professionalism, and make sure that they are safe.
In terms of teachers, I want to focus on the teachers for just a little. Teachers that are over the age of 60, are they obliged to go back, even if they don't have any other underlying issues, health issues to deal with? Or are they, entitled to not go back due to the risks?
There is a agreement between the teacher unions as the representatives of teachers and the department about teachers applying for special leave. And there will be very careful attention paid not only to age but other comorbidities that intersect with age, such as diabetes, such as being on other treatments which might weaken the immune system, such as being obese. So that process is in place for teachers to apply. What's less certain to me is whether the funds exist to replace all of those teachers, whether the teachers that are available will be able to come in, and schools are going to be managing this complex timetable task with fewer teachers in many instances.
That's something that I think teachers need to be made aware of. Also, the issue of homeschooling or online learning, because that's been the story for a couple of months, where some lucky students, and I do say lucky learners because not everybody's had the privilege to have home learning, homeschooling or online learning. Now, the president had said that homeschooling is an option, and that if you feel you don't want to send your child back to school, you're in all your rights not to do that, within your rights. But what if schools are not able to assist you with a homeschooling program, or their online program is suddenly phased out and now you're left with no option but to send your child to school? You know, what rights do parents have with this regard?
The minister has said that if you don't take your child back to school, you have to apply officially to keep them at home and homeschool them. I don't think that that's a sensible approach in my view, because many parents are going to be observing what's happening at school, making sure that their children are safe. And I'm sure that whilst the minister is correct that we have to ensure that no children lose their rights, there also has to be a supportive environment for families who are checking that they themselves and the school are ready. Homeschooling in terms of using electronic platforms and IT is not a feasible position for the majority, because we know that only 1 in 10 households even have internet at home. And that's whether it's on the phone or through Wi-Fi. Very few children can access materials. So parents have the responsibility to prepare their own children to be back to school, to be able to participate in school activities responsibly with managing their masks, managing hand washing. But if they keep their children at home for a longer period, they need to apply, and they also need to maximize opportunities for learning at home through the broadcast that's available, through making learning activities through what resources are at home. But for the majority, that's going to be very limited and part of the massive inequalities that the virus has exposed for us.
And I mean, this is a very, very difficult year for everybody right now. So one would be, you know, a bit wary of the results that we can expect coming out, because I know that that's what we always look to at the end of the year. And, you see provinces celebrating that they've increased, they've done better. But the pressures that are on these learners now, this is obviously going to be impacting the final results that we do see. Do you imagine that there's going to be a lot more leniency when it comes to pushing pupils through into the next grades?
The leniency for grades 1 to 11 for me is fundamental to returning to school in a fair way. We cannot ask some children to be passing and failing grade 6 or 8 when they haven't had as much schooling as others. We also need to make sure that for the grade 12s, every effort is made to support them. Because one of the things that Umalosi has been very clear about is that the class of 2020 has to have the same validity of their matric results as any other year. You cannot have the class of 2020 saying, well, my NSC isn't as worth much as previous years, as later years. So for everybody, grade 0 to 12 to 11, we need to reduce the pressure of passing and failing. We need to take that off the table. We need to see the learning as a continuum for 2010 to 11, and the fact that this will be caught up over time. We can't be cramming the curriculum in the time that's available, which is less time even if schools stay open for the rest of the year. For the grade 12s, it's massive support so that they have a credible NEC and a fair NEC, and we must move the emphasis away from competition and high-stakes testing to enriching the lives of young learners through school.
Professor, I want to diverge a little bit about the readiness of schools being open, and I think you've spoken to us a lot about this, but there's been something else that has been brewing in a lot of schools around the country, and I feel we need to just dedicate a few minutes to talking about that. And this is the issue of racism at schools. I'm sure you have seen this weekend a lot of past pupils and pupils speaking out about the racism that they have encountered within the schooling system here in South Africa. I mean, I could name a couple of them, but I won't go there. But they're there, they're all over the media, and people are writing and talking about experiences. And I think all of this, of course, coming on the back of Black Lives Matter. And you realize that racism still exists in a big way in schools in South Africa. Perhaps you can talk to us about this and your views on where we are as a country with regard to education.
Racism is present in schools as much as it is present in every institution and fabric in South Africa. One of the most important things is for people to not deny it, to open themselves to learning about how we experience each other. Our implicit assumptions about who is inferior and who is a superior. And the most dangerous thing are people who say, I'm not a racist. It's not me, it's other people. Every South African has to keep interrogating all of their attitudes, all of their assumptions, all of their reactions. It's a long life journey. The fact that the Black Lives Matter terrible tragedy in the US is making people sit up and look should result in an openness to learning, not a denial. And that is true of schools as in any other institution.
I mean, you read some of these experiences, and a lot of them are talking about hairstyles, about accents, about pronunciation of names, about still in many of the private schools, the dominating white leadership, and black pupils not feeling welcome in them. When we look at this, and we're living in Africa, and we're living in a time where we keep on talking about equality, and we're moving on, and things are different, and yet when you start listening to young learners who have gone through a system that they feel has not treated them properly, what is the advice that you would give schools? How do they start changing?
I think the first is and to listen non-defensively. When schools sit and learn, and by listening to learners, hear what they're saying about their perceptions, how they experience the attitudes of others, what they experience in the playground, in the classroom, the way that they feel alienated by not having role models within the school, then we can, I think, often make progress because we've begun to understand the perspective of the other.
I'm going to leave it there for this morning, but we value your inputs into these conversations that we're having, addressing the back to school for grade 7 and 12s around the country, as well as racism that really has sparked a huge wave of many pupils speaking out about their experiences in the education system here in South Africa. Professor Mary Metcalfe, an education specialist, addressing these issues. Let's take a break. We'll have the news at 7 after this. Do stay tuned.